If you're out there working hard, wondering what's next, and feeling frustrated and unclear because you're not getting the right answers, this podcast is for you. Stop guessing and start building a future you actually want to be a part of. Welcome to the Be Future Ready podcast, hosted by Sarah Price, brought to you by Living Your Strengths. And it all starts now.
I was working with a client who's a senior leader in AI and data, someone who spent 25 years advising Fortune 500 companies on how to use technology to work smarter, and someone who literally knows more about AI than almost anyone you will meet. And he hired me, a human, to help him with his career. And that's what this episode is today. I have a guest who I'm genuinely so excited to introduce you to, not only because of his title, but because of what he's willing to share with you today. Raj Merchant is a senior leader in AI and data who has spent his career in the intersection of financial services technology as a transformational leader. He's advised Fortune 500 clients, led global teams, and he just accepted a senior role at one of the most respected professional service firms in the world. Raj, welcome to Be Future Ready.
Well, thanks, Sarah. I'm really glad to be here. And I mean, it's funny to hear you describe it that way. The senior AI leader hired a human. Makes me laugh because it's true. And it might be the most useful thing that I can share with your listeners today.
Yeah, and that's what we're really excited to do because we really just want to hear from you based off of all of your experience. So what I first want our audience to know is who you are. So I really just want to start there. So tell everyone who you are and all of the experience that you bring.
Sure. So, I mean, I think you covered a lot of it in the intro. I've spent 25 years building a career in technology consulting, primarily focused on data and AI, serving Fortune 500 clients in highly regulated industries. So think financial services, insurance, utilities, healthcare, life sciences. And over my career, I didn't move much between jobs. I joined a small boutique consulting firm right out of undergrad, was there for 12 years. Then that firm was acquired by a larger firm in 2013, stayed there for 9 years. And then in 2022, shortly after my son was born, I needed a career change. And so I moved to a large accounting and advisory firm and was there for about 15 months. And then in 2023, returned back to my previous firm to take on a role that was more broadly focused on data and AI. And then, like a lot of people, I was impacted by a workforce reduction 3 months ago. But what I've learned through the process is that each of those steps in that journey has positioned me for where I am today. And it's all part of my story.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. Nothing is really a mistake, right? It's just no regrets. It's just learning and moving forward. So yeah, thank you for being so transparent about that. And when you say AI and data, I want to make sure our listeners understand what that actually means in practice, because AI means something different to a 22-year-old, for example, listening to this than it does someone who's been in the field. So what does your work actually look like day to day?
So a lot of people might think about AI as generative AI, what we've seen emerge since 2022 with ChatGPT and Claude and Copilot. But remember, AI has been around for decades. I'm talking about traditional AI, so machine learning, natural language processing, computer vision. And to make it really simple, distill it down, I help large organizations use their data to drive real business outcomes. So better customer service, process automation, lower cost, higher revenue, but it's always tied to a business outcome and it's never technology for its own sake. And we're talking about data and AI, and data is the fuel for AI. So that's why they're so closely linked. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a large life insurance company. One of your most critical functions is paying out death claims when a policyholder passes away. And it's one of the most human moments that an insurer ever has with a family. And it also happens to be incredibly document heavy. There's a lot of data that's required to process those claims, including claim forms, death certificates, legal documents, tax forms. And those documents are those documents at their core represent unstructured data. So now let's imagine a scenario where you can capture all those documents automatically, use AI to identify them, extract the data from them, and run business rules against that data. Now you're getting closer to the ultimate goal for many insurance companies, which is to be able to auto-adjudicate claims, or at least the straightforward claims. Here's the caveat. Using AI to automatically process claims without a human in the loop can be really problematic, right? You want to keep a human in the loop, or I've even been saying keeping a human in charge for anything that's high stakes and things that are not easily reversible, right? So let's go to that idea. We'll come back to it.
Okay, cool. So when we talk about AI in your world, we're not talking about, like you had mentioned, ChatGPT writing your emails. We're talking about massive systems, real business outcomes, and real risk if it goes wrong, like you said.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that context matters a lot for what I want to talk about today, because when you understand what AI actually is at scale, then you understand very quickly what it can do, what it can't do for a human being who's trying to navigate their career.
Yeah. So let's get into the thing that I think every single person listening is wondering about: AI and job searching. Everyone is using it, or thinks they should be using it, from a senior leader in the space that has, again, been in AI and data for so long, but we work together so closely. What should people actually be using AI for in their job search?
So, great question. First, remember, AI is a tool. And so, when I talk to people who are concerned that AI is coming for everyone's jobs, the reality is that, yes, there are some roles that will likely go away with AI, but for most people, it'll come down to two groups: those who embrace AI and those who don't. And so, when I was leading engineering teams in my last role, I would coach them to use AI. And I would really say, I don't care how you use it. I'm not going to tell you how to use it, but you need to find a way to use it to automate manual work, to improve your efficiency, to drive value for our clients, to ensure code quality, to do testing more effectively, right? There's so many applications and use cases. We also need to lean into what AI can't do. And that's what makes us all human. These are traits like empathy, decision making, applying judgment, managing complexity, and navigating ambiguity. So, really important just to get that out there up front. I'm a huge fan of Claude. Early on in my job search, I built a personal kind of operating system within Claude. So I fed it a bunch of information about me, the results of my Strength Finder assessment, my updated resume, what I'm looking for in my next role. So things like titles, target firms, things like that. And I'll also mention, really important, the output of AI is only as good as the input or the context that you give it. So let's talk about resumes for a minute. You and I worked together on the resume rewrite, and I did not have AI do that. And that was an intentional decision. Uh, but once we had a good baseline, then I used AI heavily to create tailored resumes when applying to certain roles. If you think about what AI is really good at, it's good at analysis, research, summarization, and creating content. And so I used AI to do things like give me a list of 20 to 25 target firms that I should be looking at based on criteria like they're based in Charlotte or they are hiring remotely. They're hiring for senior data and AI roles, highly ranked on best places to work, et cetera. And it did a really good job of giving me a detailed sort of scoring spreadsheet on those 20 to 25 firms. I then set up an agent to every morning at 7:15, it would search employers' career sites for open roles that matched my criteria. And it would identify, here are the top 3 roles that day that you should apply for. And, I was targeting 10 or 15 applications per week. So that's how we got to kind of the 3 per day. Now it did hallucinate, right? It would flag roles that were no longer open for applications. So like with everything that you get from AI, you have to verify it yourself. But on the flip side, if I found a role on my own I wanted to apply for, then I would feed it the job description and say, hey, take everything you know about me, my resume, my strengths, my interest, and score my fit for the role based on all of those characteristics. And that was really useful for me. I'm a data person, so wanted to kind of put some data and some quantifiable data around my job search.
So AI is genuinely used for some of this, right? I used it in my coaching practice too. But here's the question I want you to answer: where does AI fall short, and where do people get into trouble by relying on it too much? So, like, as an example, in my world, right, and this from us doing your resume and your strengths and LinkedIn, is people will say, well, I'm just going to go have AI build my resume. And you touched on that a little bit. and they throw in the job description, they throw in their own resume, they have their resume redone, and then they think, it's perfect and it's ready to go. And I have a lot of thoughts about that, right? Because now what's happening, and we had spoken about it, is that people started using AI when it first got popular and said, great, cool, here's the job description and here's my resume. I'm going to have it updated. And now all the resumes look the same, right? Because they all have the same applicant tracking words and the same keywords. And so now recruiters are getting frustrated because they can't differentiate who has the real talent and who doesn't. So talk to us a little bit about, about that and just where you can go wrong.
Yeah. So great question. A couple things you already touched on. So one, the AI output is only as good as the input that you give it. So the phrase I use a lot is garbage in, garbage out. This applies to companies, to individuals, anyone using AI, right? And so to get the best outcome and output from AI, it can learn more about you over time. It can learn about your background and your preferences and your writing style and your voice. And so I think just be really intentional about helping it learn over time. I think the second thing is, as you said, and AI makes mistakes. So early on, I asked Claude to create tailored versions of my resume based on the baseline resume that you and I had created. And it made formatting mistakes. It made up experience that I didn't have. It just made changes that when you're reading it as a human, when I reading it, knowing my story, my background just didn't make sense. And so I changed my approach and I began asking it to make suggestions on how I tailor my resume for a role. And then I would manually make the changes myself so that I could apply my human decision-making and judgment to its recommendations. And I think we all know, you can read a LinkedIn post or read, an email and you'll say, wow, this sounds like it was written by AI, right? There's certain tells, certain sentence structures, even certain formatting like M dashes. So I would give it instructions like, here are some LinkedIn posts that I've written. Here's some emails I've written. Learn my voice, use my voice, make this sound human, make it sound like me. Don't use buzzwords. Don't use some of the structural elements that are clear AI indicators. It's still not perfect. And so my recommendation for anyone that's using AI to write emails, write cover letters is take what it gives you as your input and then make it your own.
And so at the end of the day, there has to be a human involved.
There does. And by the way, one thing I want to go back and touch on, because you talked about the employer's view of this. And so I had a really interesting conversation with a senior recruiter at a global tool manufacturer. She had reached out to me on LinkedIn to see if I was interested in a role. It was an exploratory conversation. And so naturally, we spent most of our time talking about AI. And she shared a really interesting perspective from her side, from the employer side, that she gets flooded with so many applications in the age of AI, and they all look the same. They all parrot back the same language. And she actually gets a lot of, I'll call it fraudulent, people misrepresenting their experience or, and so for senior roles, she said she prefers to go out and find candidates on her own through LinkedIn, through her network, because she feels like she can get a better sense that they are real humans she's talking to and not AI. And so I found that to just be really interesting in terms of how AI is impacting how employers and hiring managers are approaching the hiring process as well. And so just something really important for everyone to be thinking about.
Yeah. And another example is, and when I talk to clients all the time, is they'll say, Sarah, help me write my resume, help me with the ATS words, help me make sure that I represent my experience the right way, but I don't need a LinkedIn profile. And I have a whole nother podcast about this. And Raj, we can talk about LinkedIn and AI and your profile. Like there's so much more to go into that we don't have time today. So maybe we'll talk about it next time. But LinkedIn, to your point, is just so critical because you could have the best resume ever, right? Whether, you worked on it, AI worked on it, and then you have a blank LinkedIn and now you're invisible because exactly what I had just said. And the example that you gave is lots of recruiters and hiring managers are going out and sourcing directly. And so really making sure that your brand is out there on LinkedIn the right way is just critical. And it proved that, to your point, when we did your LinkedIn too, because then I think you got, like 6 messages about interviews. So it's not just a nice to have, it's something that is critical. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was gonna, no, that's exactly right. And I think of myself as someone who has been very active on LinkedIn for years in terms of posts and, whether it's work or nonprofits or, I have a lot of connections on LinkedIn. Like I prioritize that. And yet one of the first things that you and I did was rewrite my LinkedIn profile. So it actually told my story. And I mean, you said it, the day those changes went live, that same day, recruiters started reaching out directly because I became more visible in the right way on LinkedIn, right? Same person, same experience. The only thing that changed was that my profile finally reflected who I was. So that is really important. And frankly, I think that's one thing that, as you think about how AI can help automate and accelerate your job search through some of the manual things it can do, that gives you more time as a job seeker to invest in things like your network and your LinkedIn and building those relationships, because that's what AI can't do.
Exactly. And that's the critical part of it is the networking and is connecting with your connections. And one question I have for you quickly is, because you are so exceptional in data, a lot of people think that they can just like set it and forget it, or set LinkedIn and forget it. And for me, from a career coach perspective, my view is obviously you cannot set it and forget it, right? So can you talk a little bit about, in your search and in the work that we did together, is there any really magic algorithm or sauce that you could tell it's maybe LinkedIn or a spreadsheet to feed you 100% accurate information? Because I think that people think that they can, and I don't agree with that, but I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, great question. So because I thought I knew a lot about LinkedIn, but there are a lot of things that you shared with me that I wasn't aware of in terms of how you can create more visibility for yourself with recruiters and hiring managers. So for example, by following companies' profiles and by engaging with posts. The other thing that I will say I really was amazed by that really became super valuable in terms of algorithms is that LinkedIn Jobs is a great source of jobs, right? I'm not saying you apply through LinkedIn, but their jobs board has, I was on there daily, multiple times a day looking for jobs. And and one thing was that I really found was, once my LinkedIn profile was updated to really reflect my experience and my story. And then as I would either save favorite jobs, apply for jobs that were on LinkedIn's jobs board, it got smarter, right? And it got better at recommending jobs to me based on my experience, my profile, and my interests. So again, that was my primary source, throughout the day of looking for roles I wanted to apply for was through LinkedIn, because the data it has is so good. And it knew so much about me that it was able to really do a good job of recommending roles that I would be a good fit for.
So how many hours a day do you think you spent really working on your job search, right? And although you had set up all these algorithms and all the tools and all these rubrics and things like that to really make your search most effective as a data person, how many hours did you spend really having to do the work?
Yeah, that's a great question. It would vary by week. I think, I was intentional coming into it that I didn't want it to be a full-time job, because I felt like if I spent 8 hours a day applying for jobs, that could be really kind of demoralizing if I wasn't seeing the payoff I wanted. So my target was a couple of hours a day. So, I think about outcomes, right? And so I try to kind of define what my KPIs were. And so I was targeting 10 to 15 jobs a week. So roughly 3 a day. So if I would find my 3 roles a day I wanted to apply for, I would do that and complete, sort of check the box there. And then I'm really dependent on what I had going with interviews. I had a lot of interviews. And so it was, prepping for interviews. It was engaging with companies and recruiters, and then leveraging my network, right? So I had a goal of arranging, 2 to 3 coffee chats or phone call catch-ups per week. Because again, it's the job search is not just applying for jobs. It's networking, it's building your brand, it's engaging with your network, it's doing all the other things holistically that you need to do to be able to find your next role.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and just being so transparent, because I think there's a lot of noise out there just around, oh, AI is just going to do this job search for me. And yes, it can save you hours upon hours if you use it the right way. But you still, as a job seeker, have to still do the work. You still have to spend time applying. You still have to spend time networking. And I've talked about this before in another podcast, but the data is now saying that for every 100 resumes, really only 25 might get through to a human. And then 7% of that is employer referrals. And 45% of that 7% are the ones getting hired because they're referred. So just so important. And that happened to you where, we updated your LinkedIn and then people were proactively reaching out to you, which, did work. So you used AI, we created your story on your resume and LinkedIn, and then people really saw who you are. So I just want to let the audience know, especially coming from an expert like you, I really wanted them to hear, guys, you have to do the work, right? Roger's a senior AI leader and knows better than anyone I've ever talked to about how to use AI and data. And he still had to spend hours, right, doing the work to find a role. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, exactly. And one thing I'll just add is that, touching on sort of that last point, AI is a mirror. It's not a sword. So it can reflect back and sharpen what you hand it, but it can't originate your story. So here's the thing I had to learn the hard way, right? When I started, I didn't really have a clear story to give it. And so I could feed it my resume and my Strength Finder results and, a bunch of other information. But that's not the same as actually understanding, those strengths and believing them and knowing how to talk about them out loud. And so I think the gap between the data about me and me actually owning who I am, that's not a gap that AI can close for you. And so that's where you have to do the work to be most effective and to use AI most effectively. And so that turned out to be the human part of it.
That last point is so important. AI reflects back what you give it. So if you do not know your own story or your own strengths or your own value, AI cannot find that for you. It just makes up something that sounds plausible. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Let me ask you something else and something specific. So for someone who's job searching right now, what is the one thing you see people doing in AI in their search that you would tell them to stop doing?
So I see 2. I think one is using AI to do all the work and not putting that human element, right? So just using AI to write your resume, write your emails. I think that's one. The bigger one, I think, is using AI to apply to 200 jobs when you should be going deep on 20. The reality is that AI makes spray and pray really easy, right? And so at any serious level, that's backwards from how it should be. So don't let it write everything, because as you said, like that is the fastest way for you to come off and sound like every other candidate who's applying.
Yeah, and then you're going to get frustrated, right? Because you're like, I just applied to 200 jobs and I'm not hearing back. It's because you didn't put the time in to create your own story to figure out how you're differentiating yourself.
That's right.
And again, not to go off on a tangent, which I always do, but there are so many, Raj, now I see on TikTok and Instagram, all of these new job AI sites that say, oh, you don't have to use LinkedIn anymore. Just use blah, blah, blah .ai. And I got a job in a week. And it's really disheartening to me as a career coach with 25 years HR experience that companies now are charging job seekers like $20 a month or whatever it is to input generic information and then promising back you're going to get a response. When you literally just told us, Raj, that a senior recruiter for the executive level function is getting inundated with resumes like that, and they can't sift through 1,000 different resumes, so they're not doing that. So for my audience, the Sarah Price opinion is, please stop paying those AI sites to guarantee that you're going to get a job. And I think, Raj, you just touched on that. Would you just agree with that in general?
I would, and my maybe biased opinion, but my professional opinion, having gone through this, is pay the $20 a month for Claude Pro or something similar and do it yourself, right? I mean, I think a lot of what those job AI companies are probably just wrappers around Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot. And so you can do a lot of that yourself, just using the tools that are there directly. And I think, sort of save your money or redirect it.
Yeah, that's so great. So what is the one thing that you would tell them to start doing with AI that most people are not doing yet?
So I think it depends on where you are in your job search process. But if I'm just answering generally, I would say use AI to go deep and not wide. So I think the one thing that I didn't anticipate is just sort of how much value it would add in terms of interview prep. So before every interview, I would ask it to build a briefing, a prep guide for me, research the company, predict the questions I would get, and both the questions that I should be ready to answer, as well as the questions I should be asking. Again, I had my own, but it was a good input for me, and it was scary accurate. I mean, I think there was one role I was in consideration for a small boutique consulting firm, and I had the final round interview with the founder and CEO. And I kid you not, every question he asked me was one that Claude had anticipated and told me I should be ready for. And so that was, I think, just an eye opener for me. And so you can even have it do role plays. You can ask it to assume the persona of the interviewer and run a full mock interview. Honestly, that's the one place I didn't use it to its full potential. But if I were going through this process again, I would lean into that even more.
So research depth over application volume. That's going to land for a lot of people listening for sure. So a couple more questions. So here's the part that I want to be honest about, because I think it's the most interesting part of your story. You know AI, you work with AI every day at the highest level, and you still called a human career coach. I want to just know honestly why, because I get a lot of people that say, I can just have AI do it. Why would I hire you? And I'm not talking about me. There's thousands and thousands of career coaches and certified strength finder coaches out there. So this is really just a general question, because I just think it's really important. I just hear that all the time.
Yeah, no, that is something I certainly, sort of had to ponder myself. And what it ultimately came down to for me is, look, humans hire people into roles. AI doesn't, or if it does, then that's probably not a firm where I want to work. And so at the end of the day, a human was going to sit on the other side of a Zoom call and decide whether to bring me into their organization. So I wanted someone in my corner who's lived that, who's been on the other side of that virtual table. And Sarah, you spent 25 years in corporate HR. That's a lived experience that AI doesn't have. The bigger reason, which I've sort of talked about, is that AI can tell me what's on my resume, but it can't tell me what I'm worth. And it's relentlessly agreeable. So it'll happily tell you that every instinct you have is brilliant. Every idea you have is great. I needed someone who would tell me when I was wrong, or more often when I was selling myself short. So here's an example. Negotiating comp. That's really uncomfortable for me. We talked about that in one of our sessions, and you put together an offer negotiation rubric for me. And in there, you reminded me that the person on the other side is actually expecting me to come back and counter. And so that I needed to set my discomfort aside. And AI is never going to push back on me like you or like a human would. And so, it's because I know exactly what AI can do that I also knew what it couldn't do for me. And when you understand a tool that well, you stop asking it to be something that it can't be.
Right. And that was all based off of your strengths assessment that we did first, because we use that as a tool in this process because it tells you how you think, feel, and behave, and we had detailed results from that. So when we got to the negotiation stage for you, I knew what your top 10 strengths were, and I knew what your bottom lesser strengths were and where you were going to feel uncomfortable, right? And initially you knew innately, oh, I don't like this negotiation stage, but we use the strengths results to really pinpoint as a blueprint and say, no, Raj, I am telling you, you're probably not going to like this because of these strengths. Get ready for that, right? And so when you have to negotiate, you're not going to feel comfortable about it. So I'm going to walk through with you and be your partner in how to feel comfortable with that. So again, I just, nothing is going to replace human connection, period. And so just to be able to now know you and honestly call you my friend is just phenomenal. So,
well, can I jump in because I want to just add one thing about the Strength Finder. Like, when we started working together, and you worked with me, had me take it. That's probably the third or fourth time I've taken it in the last 10 years. But it became kind of an anchor point for everything I did. Meaning, not only kind of the deep dive that you did with me to really explain how those strengths showed up and really how those strengths would determine what roles I should be targeting or not targeting. That was really helpful. But also when I fed that into AI, that became in every step of the way, having it sort of tie things back to my strengths. So if I was evaluating fit for a role, should I apply for it? It would say, well, here's what your Strength Finder says. So this might be a good fit, it might not be, or just watch out for this. Same thing with interviews. Like, here's how someone with your strength shows up in an interview. You need to, and so it was just a good, again, sort of anchor for me to be aware of that at every step, applying, interviewing, evaluating offers, negotiating in a way that I had not, done that before. So I'm a big fan of the Strength Finder and the approach you took in terms of how that really is applicable to a career search.
Yeah, and it's funny because I remember you had called me and you were like, hey, Sarah, I'm going to apply for a role that does fully XYZ. I won't say what the role was or what the job description was. And I was like, actually, no, we're not going to do that because pull up that job is reflecting all of your lesser strengths. Why would you even apply to that job, right? And so that saved you time because you're like, oh yeah, we're not doing that. And then we could really focus on applying for the right role. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to ask you something that might be uncomfortable. So when you first came to me, and you can be honest as you want here, where was your confidence? Because from the outside, you look like someone who has it all figured out, right? I mean, your education is phenomenal. Your background story is phenomenal. But sometimes that's not the whole story. So tell our audience a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that, right? Because I think a lot of people probably are in similar spots. So my confidence at the time we started working together was really low. So I'd been burned out in my previous role for about 5 months, and then getting laid off, right, is never easy. And I've always had a major case of imposter syndrome, despite the things that you said about me. Very nice of you to say, but yeah, like I've always had imposter syndrome. And so I was starting from a place where I was not at all confident. So sort of working with you helped me sort of frame my story and be able to tell my story in a way I would not have probably been able to tell it on my own. And then one thing you helped me realize is I began approaching my job search from a place of, so originally, if I didn't check all the boxes in a job description, I wouldn't apply. And I hadn't updated my resume in several years, and the resume I had didn't fully tell my story. And so I felt like I was stuck. But throughout the process, I realized that we all have a unique story. And, one thing that I learned and had to kind of change my mindset was that job descriptions are like, they're like wish lists for, it's not a checklist. And so just sort of reframing it where maybe I had 60% of the requirement, 80%, right? But not feeling like I had to be a perfect fit to apply for a role.
Right. So let's bring that around to AI. right? So when we talk about confidence, applying what to apply for, if you don't have a human to guide you along the way, whether it's a coach or a friend or a peer, and you were solely to rely on AI, let's say for this confidence piece or imposter syndrome piece, is there anything in your data and AI experience that you could say, oh, AI could have solved that for me?
Not in the way that a human would have. I mean, I think again, I think we've seen AI tends to, it'll be a cheerleader. It will, but again, it's going to parrot back what you feed it. And so, I don't think that AI could be that same, provide that same experience that you get working with a human. I just don't think it's built that way.
So, because the most qualified people in the room are often the last ones to apply, the ones who know the most, who have seen the most, who have built the most, they're the ones sitting on their hands, right? Saying, I'm not sure I'm ready. And that's what no AI tool is going to fix for you. I think that we've just, talked through. So for someone listening who's in that place right now, really talented, has experience, maybe a little stuck, what would you tell them about the gap between what they know they can do and what they actually can do?
So I think the gap usually isn't competence, it's permission. And so the most capable people that I know are often the ones, like you said, sitting on their hands, because the more you know about something, the more aware you are of everything that you don't know. And I lived in that place for years. So here's what I would say. Your story is worth telling. If you're like me or the previous version of me before I went down this journey, you're probably the worst judge of your own value. So get a human in your corner who can see it clearly. So that could be a career coach like you, Sarah. That could be a mentor or a friend who will be straight with you. And I'll say, you talked about someone who says maybe they don't feel ready. So stop waiting to feel ready, because ready may never show up on its own. So again, I think what I learned is, if you find a role that you like, that's interesting, apply before you feel 100% qualified. And remember again that job description is a wish list and not a checklist.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. So I want to make sure we give something to everyone listening, because our audience spans a lot throughout career stages. So let me ask you this by group. Okay. So let's start. If you're early in your career, let's say you're 22 to like 30, 35, and you're job searching right now, what's the most important thing you need to understand about AI in your career?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. Think of AI. It's a tool that everyone needs to be literate in right now. I would say, everyone's using it or should be using it in their job search. I think of AI now of like how Excel used to be. Like that was traditionally a key skill or a tool you needed for anyone going into finance or accounting. And AI is no different, other than it's much more transformational and much more disruptive. So if you're early career, use AI to learn and accelerate and punch above your weight. So the things we talked about with company research and interview prep, you can go so much deeper with AI than you might feel like you could do on your own, but also know it can't do everything for you. I think coming in with that mindset is really important.
Yeah, because so much of our young adults right now and young professionals, we quarantine them, right, for 3 years. They have access to all this social media, and now AI is just part of their life, right? Where Raj, you and I, back in the day, I mean, there wasn't any of this. So we learn differently and our brains learn differently. And so I think there's some danger, honestly, to our young adults and our young professionals, which with how much they rely on AI. And I think that's why they're getting frustrated with I'm applying to 200, 400 jobs, because they're not utilizing the tool the way that you're describing it to us today.
Well, and I want to add, because that's so important, because something you said just resonated with me in terms of early career professionals who were going through school, during COVID and quarantine, and then now are in the phase of maybe being fully remote work. And so I think my advice would almost be not just what I talked about with how to use AI, but also, again, prioritize the in-person interaction, the networking, the soft skills, right? All the things AI can't do, like those are skills that are in demand. That is how every job, every professional is going to be able to differentiate themselves over AI, is to be able to do the things that humans do. And so I think just sort of as an early career professional, making sure that you are networking, building relationships and all of that, because again, like we've said, AI really can't do that for you.
Yeah, and one other thing to that is that you had mentioned this earlier in the conversation, that when you first put your resume together, it gave wrong information and it made up experience that you didn't have. And what I've seen a lot in the HR space and talking to colleagues and as I'm helping people write their resume is, if you have AI write your resume and you don't really review it and put a human touch on it and you send it and you actually get an interview, you better be prepared to answer the question about something that's on your resume. And a lot of times, what's happening is they do their resume based on a job description. AI puts in all the ATS and all the keywords. Then they're like, cool, my resume is done. They get an interview. They go into the interview, and the human asks you, oh, can you explain this? Or tell me a time when? And they completely, go blank because they don't have that experience to back it up. And then what you've done is now you've ruined, that's a harsh word, but you've tainted your brand now to another human being in the hiring space. Now you're not going to get that interview. You're not going to move on. And even if you have the best experience, because all the recruiters talk to each other and they share candidates, right? So I used to do that all the time when I was in HR. I'd be like, listen, I'm looking for a data analyst, or I'm looking for a content writer. Do you have anyone in your candidate pool that maybe was in the final rounds, but you didn't hire? Well, they can recommend people based on how they interviewed. So you can't, as a young adult, you cannot underestimate the importance of your brand and what is on your resume and what's on LinkedIn and how you're positioning yourself in an interview. And I think as we get older and we go through some of these other age groups, that might not be an issue, but for this age group, that's what I'm seeing.
Well, no, but I think that becomes more important the more you advance in your career. And one thing you had said to me, which I had not thought about, is just sort of look, I personally, wanted to come into this process really being authentic, who I am, right? I don't want to try to be someone I'm not. And so, you had talked about so many anecdotes from your own career and the people that you've coached around people who had an interviewed for a role. Maybe it wasn't the right fit, but made a really good impression on a hiring manager or a talent professional. And that led to a role down the road. And so I think, again, if you just want to be authentic and build your brand and build those relationships, you don't want to do anything to, like you said, ruin or tarnish that up front, especially something that would have been so preventable by actually reviewing your resume and, before you send it out the door.
Yeah, such an important point. I hope everyone takes note of that. So what about someone who's mid-career? Maybe they've been in the same industry for 10 or 15 years and they're wondering if AI is going to change everything they have done or built. What would you say to that person?
It's going to be a similar answer. I think in general, no matter what stage of your career you're in, you need to be AI literate. So if you're mid-career, your experience is a mode, it's not a liability. And so I think domain expertise plus AI literacy, that's the strongest combination in the market right now, because AI needs humans who understand the context, the complexity, and the stakes for any kind of, for any business. And so I think that's just really important to view it through that lens.
And what about for senior leaders? So people who are at your level, who might, be looking at the market and wondering how to position themselves when there's younger people who grew up with this technology.
It's going to be a similar answer. And I think it's, make sure that you're fluent with AI. I think it's easier than you think. If you're not AI literate, AI fluent, it's easier. The path to do that is not as bad as you would think it is. And then really it's, the more senior you become, it becomes more important to, I'll say, both lean into what AI still can't do, right? We've talked about it: judgment, relationships, empathy, leading through ambiguity. But also you think about, if you're, going to enter an organization where you're looking to implement AI, I mean, so much of it becomes governance and AI, ethics. And I mean, there's such an operational element to how to responsibly deploy AI within any organization. And so I think it's really going to, I think that's where senior leaders can shine, right? Is really focusing on the areas that AI cannot replicate, because that's what companies really are struggling to find.
Yeah, and my experience with senior leaders, and we've talked about this, Raj, is that CEOs and CFOs and C-suite level or SVPs are looking for someone to not only give the data, but really think strategically about the problems of the business. And then you hire your lieutenants, under you, that you've already done that job to build the reports and those type of things, right? So we talked about this next level for you and how integrated you are with data and AI, because you've grown through this career for many years, and now really coming to the table from that strategic piece. And you can use that using AI, but that doesn't replace all of your experience or anyone's experience that has 15 to 20 years of experience and what you're showing up at that executive or board level table with. So it's the balance, between AI and using your brain and thinking strategically.
Yes, absolutely right.
So the last piece of advice question, if someone is sitting down tonight and they want to use AI to help them with their job search, give them practical starting point. Like, what is step one?
So I will give your listeners the same advice I would give to my large enterprise corporate clients, which is, before you jump into AI, you need to assess your data and AI readiness. And we talked, like, if you feed it garbage, you'll get garbage back from it. And so in the context of the job search, my advice is that you spend a little bit of time tonight, if you're in this journey or about to embark on it, spend time figuring out what you're looking for, right? The strategy, your target company, your type of role, title, comp, because AI can be a good thought partner. So if you say, hey, here's my problem statement, I'm not sure how to navigate it, can you ask some clarifying questions and give me some recommendations? That's an approach that really works well too. So don't feel like you have to come to AI with all the answers. You can actively brainstorm with it in real time and kind of use that to ideate or to work through to some recommendations. But it's all about sort of starting with what are you trying to get out of it? What are you looking for? Because you need to have that foundation before you kind of jump right in.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, the more information you give it about yourself, the better recommendations you are. You just can't sit down at ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude with zero information and be like, generate me a resume or tell me what industry to look in. I mean, that took many searches and a lot of time for you to build it.
I mean, you could do that. You will not get good results from it, right? Yeah, the outcome, what you get back will be very surface level or just not you.
Right. So before I let you go, what is the one thing you most want someone to walk away with from this conversation today?
So I'm going to tie it back to that insurance claim example we talked about earlier, where the holy grail for an insurance company is to automatically approve or deny a claim. Remember that?
Yep.
So I also said companies should not let AI make the final call on its own when the stakes are high or when the outcome is not easily reversible. You keep a human in the loop and a human in charge. Your career is the exact same thing, right? So use AI to handle time-intensive tasks, the research, the prep, the tailoring, all of those things. But for the decisions that actually matter, who you are, what you're worth, where you're headed, don't delegate those tasks to AI. Please don't, right? Because AI can reflect you back, but it can't find who you are.
I love that. And I think what strikes me most about this conversation is that you, someone who lives and breathes AI and data, are the best argument for why human element still matters, not instead of AI, alongside it, knowing that the tool, what it can do, and also knowing what it cannot do. So Raj, thank you for being here. This conversation is going to mean a lot to a lot of people. Where listeners, where can they find you, where they can connect with you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. Please connect with me. One thing I've learned throughout my own journey throughout this process is that so many talented, capable people have gone through this or are going through something similar now. I've had so many great one-on-one conversations with either fellow job seekers or people who are thinking about making a move. And I love talking about this. So just please reach out to me, even if you just want to have a conversation.
Awesome. And one more last question. I promise this is the last one. What do you think is the most reputable site or publication to learn about AI, like real news, like not fake news?
Yeah, great question. So there are a few, I think. So Ethan Mollick is a Wharton professor who studies entrepreneurship, innovation, and AI. And so he has a blog called One Useful Thing. I think that's a great read, and that's really, sort of targeted at professionals, but not super technical. I also like MIT Technology Review, if you're more looking for sort of that type of journal or publication. And then, in terms of training, you've got platforms like LinkedIn Learning and Udemy, but I also want to specifically call out Anthropic Academy. So Anthropic, they're the makers of Claude. They have several free online modules that are even targeted at applying AI in different industries, such as education and nonprofits. So that's what I said earlier, like there's no reason why anyone shouldn't be learning AI now, because there's so many options out there, so much information that's low cost or free. But yeah, those are, I think, some of the ones that I really go to.
Put in the comments if you enjoyed this conversation. I definitely, Raj, hope you'll be on with us again, sharing more of your wisdom, because AI is literally changing by the minute, by the day. So we can continue to have conversations, because I know AI in careers is just such an important topic for this audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Let's do this again.
Thank you so much, Raj.
Thanks for joining us. Now, take the momentum and share this episode with someone in your world who's ready to stop guessing and start building. For personalized one-on-one strategy, book your free consultation with Sarah at livingyourstrengths.com. New episodes drop every Monday, so hit follow and never miss a breakthrough. Now go live in your strengths. This podcast is filmed at the Make Your Day Richer studio and edited by Richard Wilmore.